So, Cisco, I know we've talked before, but still, I can introduce yourself for the audience.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. Well, as a professional, my mission is to educate, engage, and empower anybody that I work with. So whether that's professionals like you, Eric, professionals across the country, the student athletes that I work with at Linfield University, and the middle school and high school kids that I'm fortunate enough to work with at the Rise Lab here in Tigard, Oregon. I'm an associate professor at Linfield University, which is a small town in McMinnville, Oregon, right outside Portland, Oregon. I just finished up my 6th year there. I've been at two other institutions before Linfield. And in addition to Linfield, I run the Rise Lab, which is an athletic performance business, or it's really my passion project more than it is a business. But just being able to integrate all the things that I do at Linfield, all the things that I'm passionate about in regards to strength and conditioning, and kind of moving it forward and paying it forward to middle school and high school kids, and just educating and empowering not just them, but also their parents too. Um, I'm also the graduate program coordinator at Linfield University with our master's in science and sport science and analytics, where we focus on sport technology and performance science and really educating and training graduate students to be future applied sports scientists. So I love what I do. I'm very fortunate to be able to merge the academics with the athletics with the things that I do, and be able to continue to educate individuals through means like this with you, Eric, in the podcast.
Cool, cool. So, uh, like a few weeks ago, I think it's like a couple of weeks ago, I saw you got invited into I think is it a high school or NSCA conference to talk about like force plate? Am I right?
Um, was I? So I know I've done a few high school talks with force plates just locally here in Oregon, in introducing to them force plates, what they collect, what they measure, and how we can profile and benchmark and track progress with the force plates. I will be presenting at the National Strength and Conditioning, the National Conference for the NSCA in July. Myself and four other students from Linfield will be presenting our research through poster presentations. So that is our next upcoming presentation or dissemination of our research coming up in the beginning, or I should say middle of July, down in
Oh,
Las Vegas.
mid-July.
Yep. Yep.
Cool, cool. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be fun. It's going to be their first time presenting at a national conference. And I tell them it's a lot of fun because you get to present, but then also because it's more poster format, you just start to have these discussions about the research, future directions with the research. And most importantly, you just start to network with like-minded professionals that are interested in that specific topic or just sports science in general.
So since last time we talked, I saw you post uh a lot of like interesting topic on your Instagram. No matter it's like velocity based training, no matter it's like heart rate variability or like oh I saw that what's the name? Stage of like information processing.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yep.
Love that
Yep.
one. Love that one. So I'm gonna start with like heart rate variability, okay?
Sounds good.
So um what exactly is heart rate variability and how can we like monitor it?
So heart rate variability can be easily confused with heart rate. And heart rate is simply just however many times your heart contracts over a certain amount of time, typically in 1 minute. So that's why we get, the beats per minute. Heart rate variability digs a little bit deeper into just how many times your heart is beating in 60 seconds, but it provides more of an insight into the time between heartbeats. So if we average 60 beats per minute, it doesn't necessarily mean that our heart is beating once every second. So there are slight fluctuations within the rhythm of the heartbeat, which is what we measure when we do measure heart rate variability. And the reason why we have those fluctuations is basically the battle between your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system within your autonomic nervous system. So to bring it back just a little bit for the listeners, when we're looking at the autonomic nervous system, we break it down into parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic is what we know more as like the rest and digest. So it's when like our vagal tone or our vagus nerve that's innervating our heart starts to slow things down. And then the sympathetic is what we refer to as the fight or flight, where things naturally get sped up, heart rate gets sped up, blood pressure goes up, endocrine release hormones, basically to get you ready to survive, whether that is to, fight the opponent or run away. Again, all in order to make sure that we, as the simplest of a human form, to survive whatever stressor that's being placed upon us in that moment. So as we go through our day, we have certain moments where we are more sympathetic, we are more parasympathetic. And because of that constant battle between innovating our cardiovascular system, more specifically our heart, we have these fluctuations within the time between heartbeats. That is then what's called heart rate variability. And just probably even 15, 20 years ago, heart rate variability was awfully hard to measure. You would have needed some pretty high tech, electrocardiogram type of equipment that is pretty cumbersome, that can be time consuming. You've got to put the stickers and the electrodes on, all parts of the body to make sure that you're covering, both poles of the cardiovascular system. And as technology has advanced over that time, we're now able to track heart rate variability pretty accurately, actually, with a heart rate monitoring strap or more of like an electrical sensor. And then if anybody has the Apple Watch, has a Garmin, has a Fitbit, the photo optical method and technology that's built into those wearables can also measure heart rate variability. So now that it's more readily available, I'm hoping that more people will understand what exactly HRV is and what that number or those specific numbers can provide you in regards to an indication on how you're handling the stress of life, whether that's good stress, whether it's bad stress. Ultimately, that's what we use HRV for, is for the sake of monitoring stress levels and recovery.
Cool. So, as practitioner, how can I use how can I use these like data to implement into like my training? Is it do I have to do I really have to like monitor like day to day, or like what is the process of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ultimately, when we're using something like HRV, it's a modality to watch the balance or track the balance of our fitness and fatigue. So if I look at the fitness fatigue equation, fitness minus fatigue equals performance. So if my fitness is greater than my fatigue, my performance is going to go up. If my fatigue is greater than my fitness, then my performance is going to go down. So there are many different ways that we can monitor this equation, and HRV is just one way of doing it. So typically when we're monitoring HRV, the gold standard is to have it done first thing in the morning. So as soon as you wake up, if not, if you're wearing wearables like an Apple Watch, it can record it in the middle of the night when you truly are resting and in deep sleep. But if, like for me, every morning I put the heart rate chest strap on, I kind of get myself to relax a few more minutes after that, because as you can imagine, when you wake up and you roll over and you grab the strap, not your heart rate is going up because you're obviously awake. And then it's usually about a 2 to 5 minute recording with whatever device that you're using. And again, it not only measures your heart rate, but again, it's measuring the time between each heart rate to see what the fluctuations are in regards to time. Ideally, you would do it every morning, especially if you are trying to create that baseline. And so for certain individuals, everybody's quote unquote normal HRV levels are going to be different. So if you are able to create that baseline of recording data daily for 2-3 weeks or so, then you can really start to get a good picture on what is my normal, what is my peak, what is my valley, and then most importantly, being able to look at those numbers for athletes and think to themselves, what did I do the day before that may have caused my numbers to go up or down? And I guess it would be helpful to clarify as well that when I talk about HRV going up, that usually means that the body is more highly parasympathetic. So a high number means you've got these high fluctuations in time between heartbeats, which is usually an indication that your parasympathetic is working hard, or it's working well, I should say. A lower HRV means that you're more sympathetic. And a lower number means you have less of that time fluctuation between heartbeats, where your heart is working really like a metronome, where it is contracting rhythmically over and over and over again. You don't have these fluctuations in milliseconds between heartbeats. So a lower number means more sympathetic, which usually means that your body is a little bit more stressed. So that fitness minus fatigue, if numbers are high, parasympathetic is working well, your fitness is probably higher than your fatigue. And then vice versa. If your HRV is low, you're more sympathetic, you're more stressed, your fatigue is probably slightly higher than your fitness, and that's something that we have to track. But yeah, so going back, monitoring that daily, at that point, after you establish that baseline, you can back off a little bit and maybe do 2-3 days a week, because hopefully at that point you have a good understanding of what your body needs for the sake of recovery, so that you can maintain that fitness minus fatigue equation.
Nice. So, uh, let's say you have a, we ha- like you have an athlete and suddenly their HRV like goes down. So, what would you do to would you would you change the plan for the the day for like the training plan for the athlete?
Um, you're not gonna like this answer, Eric. It's gonna depend. um, I think, well, let's put it this way. So for me, HRV is just one way of creating communication lines between myself and the student athlete. And so you and I love training, periodizing, programming, coaching specific movements, making adjustments within movements in the weight room. But ultimately, what it comes down to is we do this to develop relationships. And we do this, like I said at the very start, to educate and engage and empower who we're working with, because they don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. And so using HRV is just one way of creating a support system for them. And again, educating them on how to take care of themselves. That just because a person has a low number on June 2nd doesn't necessarily mean we're going to say we're going to scrap our workout today and we're going to do something totally different. With HRV, it is a little bit more of like a long-term game, in the sake of watching and again, communicating and just creating more awareness on why their numbers are changing and what makes you less stressed and what makes you more stressed. You and I know there are certain things we can't control. We can't control school. We can't control work. We can't control family and the social. Like, those are just types of stressors that we have to learn how to manage. And HRV is one way of doing that. So if we see HRV numbers consistently low, let's say, an athlete goes on like a 2 to 3 day stretch where their numbers are low, which again means that they're sympathetic and they're stressed. That might be a time for a bit of an intervention, where it's like, okay, what's going on? Like, what's going on outside of the weight room? What is it that you think you need to recover? But again, the reason why I say it depends is when you and I are programming long-term for an athlete, there might be a time where we want them stressed. We want them fatigued, because you and I know that there's going to be a super compensation phase that's coming up pretty soon. And I want them stressed, because then I'm going to say, all right, we're going to deload for the next 1 or 2 weeks where you're going to have time to recover. And then in 3-4 weeks, we should see this jump in whatever, jump height, sprint time, throwing, whatever it may be. So I think a lot of practitioners almost take HRV a little bit too literal, where again, if someone wakes up and their numbers are really low, it's like, oh my gosh, like we have to back off. We have to do X, Y, Z. It's like, well, talk to them, get a sense of what's going on. Is it a part of your training plan? I think those are all factors that have to be considered before you all of a sudden just change your workout. And again, sometimes we want them to be able to push through fatigue. We want them to be able to push through stress because, when your basketball players show up to a game, they just can't tell the coach, well, my HRV was really low. Maybe I shouldn't play today. I mean, you're going to have to push through it at some point. So it is a very delicate balance in understanding HRV, but that's why you have other ways of monitoring readiness. Like we talked about last time, vertical jump on a force plate, subjective questionnaires, depending on sport, GPS metrics. Again, there's so many other ways that we can track that. HRV is just one small piece of that puzzle.
Nice, nice. I love that. So, I'm gonna jump into the next topic. That's so much question for like the HRV. And you posted another interesting topic, which I did with some coaches before, is like post activation potentiation. So can you like talk a little bit about like what exactly is like post activation potentiation?
Yeah, I mean, we're going way back now, Eric. So PAP long time ago was actually my original research agenda when I was in grad school. And I was introduced to it by my MAGE professor at the University of Idaho, where I worked on my master's and my PhD. And he shared with us an article by Dan Baker from Australia, who was huge into PAP research back then in the early 2000s. And I remember reading this article where Dr. Baker had his rugby athletes alternate heavy bench press with like a bench press throw, like on a Smith machine. And he saw the numbers go up. And in his discussion, he related complex training, which is how we referred to it. But he referred to complex training as, imagine swinging a heavy bat when you're on deck as a baseball player, taking the heavy bat away and then swinging your regular bat where now it feels quote unquote lighter. And as a former collegiate baseball player, that obviously that spoke to me. Just that one example and that one analogy really spoke to me, that's what led down the avenue of me wanting to explore post-activation potentiation. That's the fancy term. So if you read like Dr. Sale's work, he refers to it as post-activation potentiation. I think most of us that are more applied will refer to it as either complex training or contrast training, where you are alternating heavy loads with light loads with the hope of maximizing the power output of the lighter loads, because you're basically oversaturating the nervous system with the heavy loads. So again, that's where the heavy bat, light bat analogy comes into play. So if you're able to understand how the neuromuscular system works, more specifically with PAP, you can absolutely find ways to increase power output in a very short-term manner by prepping the muscular system based off of, again, heavy loads with the right amount of sets, the right amount of reps, the right load, and the right rest interval. So there are a lot of factors that go into play into how to make PAP effective for a wide variety of athletes.
Cool. So, personally, I'm back like let's say like 2 or 3 years ago. I'm a huge fan of like PAP. So did a lot of like heavy squat and like uh jump on jump on the box, that kind of stuff. But for for you, how would you implement the PAP into your training?
Good question. So like I said, there's complex training and there's contrast training. And for the sake of definitions, the way that I look at complex training is if I had an athlete do 4 sets of some sort of heavy stimulus. So let's just use a trap bar deadlift as an example. So they're going to do 4 sets of, let's say, 6 trap bar deadlifts. So we're talking, a pretty heavy load here with 2 minutes of rest in between each set. Once they finish their 4 sets of heavy trap bar deadlifts, then I'll give them about, research says, anywhere between 2 to 12 minutes of active rest. 5 to 7 kind of seems like a good magic number. Once they have that 5 to 7 minute rest, then I'm going to have them do sets of vertical jump or box jumps, or again, something that's more explosive in nature. And they'll do those 4 sets more or less consecutively. So again, they'll do a set of box jumps, they'll rest for 2 minutes, do a set of box jumps. So when you group the heavy and do all the heavy first, and then you have this rest interval, and then you group all the explosive, I refer to that as complex training. And again, that has been shown to increase power output or jump height or swing speed in the more explosive nature. Contrast is a little bit different. And now you're alternating between sets. So I'll do a heavy set of deadlift and then go do a heavy set of box jumps, and then come back to a heavy set of deadlift, and then come back to the second set of box jumps. So it's really a matter of when you're introducing the dynamic exercise, whether you're going to do all the heavy stuff first, or if you're going to alternate between heavy and light. So terminology wise, that's how I look at it. I like using both, honestly, for the sake of efficiency. So most athletes that you and I train, we've got 45 minutes with them. I mean, especially if you include a good proper warm-up. You've had people come on the podcast talking about warm-ups like 10, 12 minutes. You've only got like 40 minutes left with them. So instead of spending all my time on one exercise in one set, I'm going to alternate, in superset or compound set, or in this situation, complex contrast training. So I can get the heavy stimulus, whatever it may be, heavy back squat, trap bar deadlift, barbell deadlift, bench press for something upper body, and then alternate that with, if it's a back squat, it might be a, like a vertical jump. If it's a deadlift, it might be a broad jump. If it's a bench press, it might be an explosive med ball chest pass, where the movements are very similar biomechanically. You're just either doing it really heavy or you're doing it really, really explosive. I usually use contrast, like I said, just because of the sake of efficiency and getting as much done as I can in 45 minutes. Because of that, because of it does add a little bit of variety. Athletes enjoy it because they're not just sitting around waiting for their next set. They're moving on from something heavy to something light. And it kind of gives them that that stimulus of like, they're just constantly going, but they're doing two different things. So typically that's how it's implemented in a training session.
So, like you mentioned, we usually do like heavy back squat with like jumping, or like deadlift with like let's say sprint, that kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
do we have to like match like the same muscle group, or like we train like, let's say, heavy bench press? Does does that also gonna improve, like, let's say, our neuromuscular like firing rate for the lower body?
So Dr. Baker actually had a complex training article where he looked at 2 opposing movements. And he was able to, in his results, that his rugby players were actually able to increase the power output of, again, a bench press throw following heavy barbell rows. So we have an upper body push and we have an upper body pull, and they're not necessarily the same biomechanically. They're really opposing actions. And he was able to get his rugby players to maximize and increase their power output by doing the opposite, or exercise that work the antagonist. And his thought was, if we do heavy, in his situation, if we do heavy rows, we're creating an environment with the antagonistic muscles of the throw where Golgi tendon organs get recruited. And if Golgi tendon organs get recruited, they're going to cause the muscle to relax. And if they cause the antagonist muscles to relax, then my agonist should be able to pull my arms through a larger range of motion. So now I'm increasing the impulse of the throw, which is hopefully going to lead to an increase in power production, in his situation, power production. But if it's a med ball, the distance on how far you can throw or the speed that you can throw. So he was able to show that if you do opposing muscle groups, it can increase the power production in that. Now, in respect to upper body, lower body, I personally don't know of research that's been conducted seeing if I do heavy bench press, is that going to have an effect on my lower body? I'll be honest with you, just thinking about it right now, I don't think it'll make much of a difference. I mean, good or bad, I just don't see it. If I do heavy bench press and then run sprints, I just fail to see the correlation in regards to, again, the biomechanics of the movement, and as well as even the way the neuromuscular system is being used in order to enhance in this situation, the sprint speed after doing heavy bench press.
Cool. Love that one. So, the next thing I want to discuss is the post I mentioned earlier in this conversation. Is like, can you like walk us through like the thought process of like stages of information processing for like athletes?
That is when we talk about so love languages is kind of one thing that I've been talking about with our grad students and some other people on podcasts, just about our relationships with the athletes that we train. But in regards to athleticism, one of my love languages within athleticism is more of the cognitive side of athleticism. So what most people refer to as game IQ, just extremely smart players. I've always had an affinity towards athletes who are smart when they played. Whether and there are many reasons that factor into the high game IQ, but one of the high game IQ factors is the stages of information processing. And there are certain people that can process and survey the environment and the happenings of what's going on the field in the court. And they can make decisions extremely quick. And their decision making is very accurate and correct. And that's because of things like visual acuity, like peripheral vision, depth perception, pattern recognition, spatial awareness, memory. I mean, all these sensory motor abilities that athletes need to have that we know that we can track and measure. Also, sensory motor abilities that we know correlate to specific athletic skills, especially in something like baseball and softball. But if you have athletes that are very aware and have high numbers in these sensory motor abilities, they're able to take in information based off of what they're seeing on the field in the court, and then decide extremely quickly on what the outcome is going to be. But then the last step is them actually being able to execute that outcome with the specific motor skill, whether it's a run, a throw, a pass, a catch, really whatever it may be. And you and I, we refer to ourselves as physical preparation coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, sports performance direct coaches, whatever it may be. But there is a very untapped resource within the sensory motor and the cognitive abilities that can really help us make the athlete as holistically complete as possible. We can work on speed, we can work on stamina, we can work on strength, we can work on suppleness, which is like the flexibility, mobility piece. The coaches can work on the skill, but what about that strategy piece? Like if there's a way that we can incorporate that strategy piece into training, the increase in technology makes it easier, but can we replicate some of these situations on the field so that athletes can then process that information faster um, sports psychologists might refer to that as mental imagery, where they're just going through these situations in their head, so that when they're put in that situation on the field, they know exactly what they need to do.
It's like Kobe saying he's doing like some sort of like uh forgot the word. Uh Doing something in the mind. I forgot the word.
No, I mean, I had a post on Instagram about LeBron James.
Oh yeah.
That probably has been my most widely viewed post and most controversial, just because it's LeBron. I mean, if you listeners go back and look at my post, I posted something about an example of being cognitively aware. And then it turned into a debate on who is the greatest between Jordan, Kobe, and LeBron. And you had some people posting on there like, I don't think this guy meant for his post to be about, like, it was seriously just an example of being aware and having high game IQ. But you listen, obviously, like, I love Kobe. I was a huge Kobe fan, but he knew what was going to happen. I mean, you listen to these anecdotal stories of players that are being interviewed about playing with Kobe. It's like he knew what was going to happen. And I know you probably heard of the story where when he was on I don't know if they refer to as the last dream team with Dwayne Wade and LeBron and Carmelo, and they were playing Spain, and Pau Gasol was on that team. Kobe told them, this is what they're going to run on the first play. And when they do it, I'm going to run through Pau Gasol's chest. Like, he knew exactly what was going to happen. And sure enough, they did that. And he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He ran through the screen. And if you watch that documentary, I think it's on Netflix, they said that set the tone. They were just like, oh, wow, okay. Kobe knows what he's doing. He said he did exactly what he said he was going to do. And everybody just kind of followed, his lead at that point, and they just cruised to a gold medal. But again, there's so many different examples in all sports of, again, just the stages of information processing. Patrick Mahomes now, currently in the NFL, like, just they talk about how quickly he can just pick up information and read the defenses. But again, he has the skill asset to be able to change the way that he delivers the ball based off of what he's seeing. Again, that stuff I just listen to and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that's the stuff that I love to hear about athleticism.
Nice. I saw that post and I saw the the uh the message that leave downstairs the post. It's interesting.
It
But
was nuts.
yeah, it go crazy. And there's literally one guy saying this post was not supposed to discuss about
Yeah.
these.
And it was so funny because I randomly posted that at my daughter's volleyball tournament just one morning. Like, I was killing time between between matches, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And so I posted it. And then like 5 minutes later, it was like 300 likes and all these like comments. I'm like, what did I just do? What did I do any differently than I've been doing before to get this much traffic and attention? Which, again, I'm not going to complain about. I'm honestly, but then as I was reading through the comments, I'm like, okay, like you guys are missing the whole point of, like, this is not meant to be a debate on LeBron versus MJ or whatever it may be. But it definitely brought a smile to my face. I thought that was funny.
But just out of curiosity, so between these three players, who do you think or who are your favorite?
Oh, Eric. I mean, it's Jordan. I mean, I grew up in that time in his heyday, in the 90s. I was still a kid in junior high and eventually high school. I think that shot against that shot against Utah was in 98. I graduated from high school in 99. So
Whoa.
I grew up watching Jordan. So it's really hard for me to uh it's hard for me to sway from MJ. I saw him in his prime, but again, that definitely doesn't mean that I don't have appreciation. I think Kobe, like I said, I love Kobe. I was he was as close to Jordan, I think, as we're gonna
Yeah.
see. And as much as people hate on LeBron, like I can't do it. I mean, he's been playing at such a high level for so long, and again, his high game IQ, his physicality is still there. I mean, it's his stats are up there. I mean, it's really hard. But MJ for me, it's really hard for me to for anyone to knock to knock MJ off that pedestal for me.
Nice,
How about
nice.
what about you? What about you?
Personally, I loved Kobe the most.
Yeah.
I grew up watching Kobe and the game he played with Toronto, the 81 point
Yes.
game. Yeah.
Yes.
At before that game, I was like, no, I hated that guy because like there's only one time like Allen Iverson got into the uh champion round and they played with Shaq and Kobe and he
Yeah.
and Kobe was so he just won't pass the ball to Shaq.
No.
So so before the 81 point game, I hated Kobe, but after that season, I was like shocked, man. This guy, I love it.
Well, my students always say, I show up to class or, with another pair of Kobe's on. They're like, how many pairs do you have? It's like, well, dude, like I loved Kobe. Like I loved Kobe. And
Yeah,
now it's hard to find those shoes because
yeah,
obviously he passed
yeah,
away. But yeah, like Kobe, oh man, he just went. So when I tore my Achilles last summer,
yeah. You
you
mentioned
know,
that.
when I did tear it, I thought of Kobe in that moment. And after I calmed down from my anger, I honestly, Eric, I told myself, well, Kobe walked this off. Like he got after he if you remember, he walked it off. He shot his 2 free throws and then he walked off the court. And I tried that because Kobe walked. If Kobe walked, I'm gonna walk this off. And I could not feel my leg. Like I couldn't. It didn't hurt. I couldn't feel it. That if I put any weight on it, I would have fallen over. That I'm like, how did he walk off the court and shoot 2 free throws with a torn Achilles like me? Like there's no way that I could do it. But that's Kobe. That's
Yeah,
just how Kobe was, mind over matter.
yeah. So, yeah, I love that guy. Love that guy so much. So,
Me too.
kind of want to go back to like the word I forgot. It was like meditation. Is it like meditation that you're saying that playing some game before the game really happened, like you mentioned, like Kobe did with like the Dream Team?
Yeah. I actually think meditation is a little bit more related to going back to the HRV stuff that we talked about at the start. So meditation is usually used to calm the stressors, to calm the system, to have the parasympathetic nervous system kick in a little bit more, which is why meditation is really advised and recommended to use as a recovery modality because you're, you know, however they say, but you're connecting the mind to the body, you're bringing something more spiritual in, you're thinking either internally about yourself and what you need to do, or in some situation with meditation, you're kind of giving yourself up to some sort of higher being, whatever it is that you believe in, without getting, extremely religious. So meditation is more of using your mind to calm your body down. I think what we talked about with the stages of information processing and going and preparing yourself for what's about to happen in a game, sports psychologists refer to that as more as mental imagery and or mental visualization, where you're playing out the situation in your head. And there has been research to show that mental imagery will actually activate specific muscles as if you were doing them physically. So that's the power of having your brain and your mind think about the next at bat, or think about if I'm a quarterback and I see this specific skeleton or shell of a defense, I know that my receiver is going to be here, my other receiver is going to be here, and my running back is going to do this, and then he's going to leak out, so he's going to be my check down. So quarterbacks will do that, and they'll play it in their head. So as soon as they see that shell, they know exactly what's going to happen, and there are no surprises. If that guy's covered, I'm going to go here. If that guy's covered, I'm just going to check it down right here, and have a positive play where we're gaining 3, 4, 5 yards, and we're continuously staying in front of the stick. So I think terminology wise, that's the difference between meditation and more of the mental imagery and visualization that we're talking about.
Appreciate that, man. Appreciate for like clarifying this up for me.
Yeah, no, again, that's me. That's my definition based off of what I've read, what I've seen, done, and what I've heard.
Love that. Love that. So that's kind of all the question I have for today. So for those who are interested in what we are talking about today, no matter it's like HRV, post activation potentiation, or something like something links to like testing like uh force plate testing, where can they find like the post you mentioned and where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm very active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at the_rise RISE_lab. So at the_rise_lab on Instagram. That is the best way to get a hold of me. I usually, I mean, Eric, you can vouch for me. I respond to messages pretty quickly. I try to stay as engaged and interactive on there as I can, whether it's messages or whether it's comments on posts. But yeah, I try to educate, but Eric, I try to entertain as well on that platform, and really trying to bring smiles to people's faces and make people laugh using the things that we do in our field, whether it's strength training or the sports science testing, and try to, again, educate and entertain in a variety of different ways on there. But that's the best way to get a hold of me, as well as getting the best way to get information that I'm trying to teach people about, and really like what's going on at the Rise Lab and what's going on with sports science and analytics at Linfield here in Oregon.
Cool. For what it's worth, I love those posts and I really learn. I really learned a lot from like the force plate post, the heart rate variability, or like the information, that kind of stuff. But also love those posts you mentioned, that those those funny posts. I love that.
Again, it wasn't meant to be that. I really wanted to be an educational type of thing, but as soon as I did the first one, it just kind of came to my mind, and I said, oh, I'll do it. I mean, you can imagine that gets the most engagement on there.
Yeah.
And so now I just have fun with it. And, I still do it in a way that it's related to our field, but just in a very different, creative, humorous way. That, I mean, ultimately, Eric, at the end of the day, if people can laugh more, if people can smile more, that's just going to make our world significantly better, because then we think more about other people and how we can help other people, because we are in a good, mindset, and we filled our cup when it comes to little things like that. So I'm glad that you appreciate that.
Love that. Love that.